I sold my company for $30 million and decided to celebrate with my daughter and her husband at the most expensive restaurant in the city. But when I got up to answer a phone call, the waiter whispered to me, "I think your daughter put something in your glass." I returned to the table pretending nothing had happened. The afternoon sun filtered through the palm trees that lined my driveway and the coral rooftops, painting golden streaks across the windshield. I parked the Mercedes inside the gate, my briefcase resting on the passenger seat like a loyal companion. $30 million. That number resonated in my chest. A confirmation of 40 years dedicated to building something from nothing. My company, my life's work, finalized that morning, was transformed into security for the years I had left. I parked and grabbed the briefcase, the leather warm from sitting in the sun. If this story touches you, please subscribe to the channel and share the video to help me grow and develop better. The mansion rose before me. Gleaming white stucco, purchased 5 years ago so Elena and Julian could live comfortably while they got established. My daughter deserved everything I could give her. That's what fathers do. Elena. Julian. I called from the foyer, my voice echoing on the marble floor. Silence reigned at first. Then I heard footsteps from upstairs. Muffled voices. I moved to the foot of the stairs, a hand on the banister, ready to go up and share the news. It has to be tonight, Julian's voice carried, cutting through the silence with a sharp edge. I froze, 1 foot on the first step. "What if he notices?" Elena answered, her voice tight and weak. "He won't notice. He trusts you." That is precisely the point. I gripped the banister hard. Suddenly, the briefcase felt heavier than it should. I backed away, my shoe whispering against the marble, and headed to the kitchen. What plan? Why tonight? Questions circled me like vultures. But I suppressed them, forcing my breathing to calm down. I brewed coffee, my hands performing familiar motions while my mind spun. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. I touched the phone 3 times, my fingers hovering over my lawyer's contact. But I didn't press the call button. Not yet. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe paranoia comes with sudden wealth. Everyone warned me about that. 20 minutes dragged by before footsteps sounded coming down the stairs. I put a smile on my face and turned to greet them. Elena appeared first, Julian's hand resting on her lower back, a gesture of possession. My daughter was wearing too much makeup for a quiet afternoon at home. Julian's smile was blinding, white, and rehearsed. I closed the deal. I set down my coffee cup with extreme care. 30 million. Can you believe it? That's it. Elena's composure stretched for a second too long. That's wonderful, Dad. Her emphasis fell on the wrong syllable. I had raised this woman. I knew her rhythm inside and out. This wasn't amazement. It was theatre. Congratulations. Seriously, Julian stepped forward, his hand extended. He wasn't my son, even though he had called me Dad for 5 years. You must be thrilled. I figured we should celebrate. I shook his hand and counted the seconds until he let go. Together, as a family. Elena's fingers found her wedding ring, twisting it over and over. Of course. We are so proud of you. The words sounded hollow, like coins dropping into an empty well. I saw her eyes flick to Julian, looking for permission or instruction. I couldn't tell which. The cerulean, I said, testing them. At 8, my treat. Julian's expression shifted. Something predatory glimpsed behind his polished facade. Generous as always. The word generous carried a meaning he didn't grasp. Resentment. Anticipation. You don't have to pay, Elena began. He wants to... Honey. Julian cut her off with surgical precision. Let him celebrate. I watched them both, noticing how they positioned themselves between the stairs and me, how their eyes locked in a silent conversation. The atmosphere felt wrong, like the drop in pressure before a storm. I want my daughter there. And you, too. Julian. I delivered the words slowly, watching for any reaction. Neither flinched. Dinner was 2 hours away. I went upstairs to get ready, passing Elena's closed bedroom door. Voices, muffled but urgent, came from inside. I moved closer, shame burning in my chest as I strained to hear. What if someone sees us? Elena asked, sounding scared. No one will notice. Everyone will just think he drank too much wine. My blood ran cold. I can't believe we're restored. Do you want to keep living here? Julian's voice hardened. Do you want the money? Then stop hesitating. Silence. Then Elena. Barely a whisper. All right. All right. Tonight. I pulled back from the door, my reflection catching me in the hall mirror. 63 years old. Confident face. Fool's eyes. How long had I been blind? I went into my room, locked the door, and stood in the middle of expensive emptiness. My father's antique cufflinks waited in their velvet case. I clasped them on with shaking fingers like armor for a battle that still had no name. In the bathroom, I looked into the mirror again and made a decision. I photographed my water glass, my cologne flask, my untouched bourbon paranoid actions that would turn out to be premonitory. I felt the phone heavy in my hand, heavier than the briefcase. Review the will. Call the lawyer tomorrow. I whispered the words aloud, making them real. When I left, dressed in my best suit, I found them waiting for me at the door. We walked to the car in deafening silence. I drove my Mercedes, my car, my control, at least for now. Elena sat in the passenger seat. Julian settled behind me, his hand resting on the headrest, fingers almost brushing my shoulder, marking territory. I looked at them in the rear-view mirror more than the road. Julian met my eyes once and smiled. It was not friendly. I knew. Beautiful night, I said, shattering the toxic silence. Perfect for a celebration, Julian replied. Elena shifted in her seat. Dad, what are your plans for the money? I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Plans? I just wanted to know if you'd thought about the future. Your will. Things like that. Every muscle in my body tensed. We were still 5 minutes from the restaurant, and he was already talking about my death. Funny you should mention it, I said, keeping my tone light. We pulled into the Cerulean's circular drive. The valet, Carlos, approached with his usual professional cordiality. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling. A pleasure to see you." "Good to be here, Carlos." I handed him the keys, grateful to see a familiar face. Someone who knew me as more than a target. Behind me, Julian leaned towards Elena, barely moving his lips. "Remember what we talked about?" I turned sharply. "What was that?" Julian. His recovery was too smooth, too rehearsed. "Just reminding Elena how lucky we are to have you." The words should have sounded grateful. Instead, they sounded like an obituary read too soon. We entered the restaurant, and I followed my daughter and son-in-law through doors that might as well have been the entrance to my tomb. But I went in anyway, leaving the briefcase behind, abandoning blind trust in its place, observing everything now with the clarity of a man who finally understands he is prey. The host led us through the main dining room of the Cerulean, past tables where other families laughed, unsuspecting of the secrets hidden behind their own appearances. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay, and the city lights were beginning to glitter on the dark water. Our table, right by the glass, occupied a privileged position with a spectacular view. Of course, only the best for the man they planned to destroy tonight. I pulled out Elena's chair, an old habit hard to break. She sat down without meeting my eyes. Julian claimed the seat facing the room, positioning himself to observe everyone and everything. I took the remaining chair, the one against the wall, which seemed perfect. I wanted to observe, too. A waiter appeared, young and efficient, dropping off menus and reciting specials I didn't register. My attention was fixed on the table setting. Elena to my left, Julian opposite, my wine glass just within her reach. "Wine," Julian suggested, signaling the sommelier. "Of course." I kept my voice light, curious to see how far they would take this performance. The sommelier arrived, presenting the wine list with reverence. Julian ordered a high-end Napa Cabernet that cost $300 a bottle. "My money. Your taste." I nodded approvingly, watching Elena's fingers dance on the tablecloth, tracing invisible figures. Minutes later, another waiter, older in his 40s, with an attentive look that suggested his perceptiveness, approached. His name tag read Matteo. He poured the wine with near-professional precision, filling each glass to the correct level. The deep burgundy liquid caught the candlelight, promising warmth and celebration. I watched the position of each glass, memorizing their location. A toast. Julian raised his glass, and the performance continued. "To new chapters," Elena offered, her voice slightly strained. "To family," I countered, watching them both freeze for an instant before reacting. Cheers. And glass chimed against glass. I brought the glass to my lips, but I didn't drink, setting it back down just as my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. Perfect timing. Or perhaps the intervention of some force that sometimes protects the unwary. "Excuse me." I pulled out the phone, glanced at the screen. My accountant's number. "I should take it." Deal details. Elena's relief showed in how her shoulders relaxed a fraction. Julian nodded, magnanimous. Of course. Business never stops. I stood up, phone pressed to my ear, and walked toward the patio doors. Through the glass, I could still see our table and observe their movements. The accountant's voice droned in my ear, confirmation numbers, transfer dates, paperwork I would review tomorrow, but my eyes were fixed on my daughter and the man who controlled her. On the patio, there were only two other couples far enough away for privacy. The cool October breeze brushed my face. I turned slightly, maintaining visual contact with our table through the glass doors. That's when I saw it. Elena leaned forward, her hand moving toward my wine glass. Julian's posture changed. He straightened, lifted his hand toward Matteo, who was passing by, summoning him to ask for bread, water, or some other invented necessity. A distraction tactic. Matteo changed course, following Julian's signal. But Matteo's position allowed him to see the table. I saw him lower his gaze. I saw his expression shift from professional courtesy to alarm. Elena quickly withdrew her hand. Something moved between her fingers so fast. With such practice, the wine glass remained innocent where I had left it. But even from the patio, I could see the liquid had changed darker, denser. My accountant asked me a question. I gave an automatic answer. While my world reorganized itself around confirmed betrayal, Matteo finished with Julian, walked away. But his eyes returned to my glass again and again. His movements became unsure, his professional facade cracking. I watched him debate his obligation to the customers versus his conscience. After 3 minutes that felt like hours, conscience won. I hung up just as Matteo approached the patio door. He pushed his way out, looking for me, and found me by the railing. Mr. Sterling. His voice was laced with nervousness. A slight break in the composure typical of the service industry. Matteo? I read his name tag again, memorizing it. Is something wrong with the service? He glanced into the dining room toward our table, visible through the glass. Elena and Julian were seemingly conversing calmly, but I noted the tension in their backs, waiting for my return. Sir. 2. Matteo twisted the bar towel he held in his hands. I don't know how to say this. I could lose my job. But I saw your daughter put something in your wine glass while you were on the phone. A clear liquid from a small vial. Those words should have shocked me. Instead, they crystallized everything with terrible clarity. Are you sure? I asked. Even though I had seen it myself, I needed confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. Completely sure. Sir. The glass on your left? The wine you haven't touched yet. His eyes pleaded with me to believe him. To act. I've worked here for 6 years. I've never seen anything like it, but I saw it clearly. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a folded $100 bill, and handed it to him. Thank you. Matteo, you may have just saved my life. His fingers closed around the money reflexively. What are you going to do? Nothing that involves you? I promise. Go back to work. Forget this conversation. He nodded, a mix of relief and worry on his face. Then he disappeared back into the dining room. I stood on the patio, the cool air sharpening my thoughts, watching through the glass as Elena compulsively checked her phone, and Julian's hand rested possessively on the table, claiming space, claiming control, claiming what he believed would soon be his. My daughter, my own daughter. 36 years ago, I held her minutes after she was born, promised her everything, kept every promise I made. And tonight, she tried to poison me. Not tried. She did poison me. The glass waited on the table, an innocent crystal vessel holding death. The question wasn't whether to confront them, but how to make them understand exactly what they had done and what I would do in retaliation. I took out my phone again, and this time I photographed the table through the glass. The camera captured the 3 glasses, documenting their position's evidence, though I hadn't yet decided for what purpose. I put the phone in my pocket. My reflection stared back at me from the glass door. A 63-year-old man in an expensive suit, a successful businessman, a devoted father. That man died tonight. The person who returned to the restaurant would be something colder, harder, capable of surviving in territory I never imagined traveling. I pushed open the doors. The dining room's buzz flooded the air again, conversations, laughter, the clinking of silverware, the everyday sounds of people who believe their families love them. 20 feet separated me from our table, from my daughter, from my poisoned wine. Every step calculated, measuring, preparing. When I reached my chair, my face reflected only a mild apology for the long call. I sat down, picked up the menu, and smiled at both of them like a man who hadn't just witnessed his own attempted murder. Sorry. I put down the menu, touched the wine glass lightly. A brush of fingers against the stem. A simple gesture to acknowledge its presence. The issues with the deal are all sorted out. Elena sighed with relief. Julian's smile widened. Have we ordered anything? I asked. I'm starving. And yes, not starving for food, but for justice, for vengeance, for seeing them drink the poison they had prepared for me. I placed the napkin on my lap with an almost rehearsed ease. Business never rests. Julian looked up from the menu, eyes slightly narrowed. Everything all right? Better than all right. The bank transfer has processed. It's official. I lifted my wine glass, brought it close enough to smell the aroma, and then set it down without drinking. Let's order first. I want to savor this moment properly. Elena's fingers traced the stem of her glass. The poisoned glass she prepared for me? No. Hers was still safe. Her smile seemed borrowed from a stranger. What's so good? Dad. To family, I said, raising my clean glass in a symbolic toast, but still not drinking. They raised theirs. Crystal chimed in unison. I watched them drink while mine remained untouched. Elena's eyes constantly darted toward my glass, a question brewing behind her feigned composure. Why wasn't I drinking? I looked at the menu, pretending to deliberate. The Chilean sea bass sounds perfect. Julian, what are you having? The steak. Rare. His choice of words was aggressive, revealing. I'm not very hungry, Elena murmured. You should eat. An important night. I emphasized the last 2 words. watching her flinch. She knew it was important, but not how important. The bread basket arrived. I tore off a piece and buttered it with slow, deliberate movements. Time stretched. They waited for me to drink. I waited for my opportunity. Julian's phone vibrated. He glanced at it. Then, at Elena, communicating silently. The tension in their patience was almost palpable. "Excuse me. I'll be right back," I said, standing up. "I'll come too." Elena jumped up, almost frantic. We walked in opposite directions toward the restrooms. I counted to 10 and then looked back at our table. Julian had his phone in his hand, head bowed, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. He was completely engrossed. 3 seconds. That was all I needed. I approached the table, extended my hand, lifted Elena's glass, placed mine, the poisoned one, right where hers had been. I put her clean glass in my spot and used my napkin to wipe the condensation drips, leaving everything as if nothing had changed. Julian began to raise his head. I was already looking at the menu. The wine glass wasn't even near my hands. "Forget something?" he asked. "Just wanted to confirm we ordered the appetizer." "All good." I walked back toward the restrooms before he could notice anything odd. When I returned, Elena was already seated, flushed, anxiety reflected in her rigid posture. I settled back into my chair, took my menu, which was now her glass clean and safe. "Did we order?" I asked pleasantly. "We ordered." The conversation, though strained, resumed. Elena was touching her throat, breathing shallowly, preparing herself for whatever came next. She reached for her wine glass. For an instant, my heart stopped. Everything slowed, her fingers on the stem, the glass rising, her lips touching the rim, the wine flowing. She drank. Not a sip. 3 large gulps, trying to calm herself. I watched her with cold, absolute clarity. Julian talked about investment opportunities, his voice a steady drone. 2 minutes passed. 3. 4. Elena's expression changed. Confusion flickered across her face. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head as if to clear a fog. "I feel lightheaded," she said, bringing her hand to her throat. "What is it?" "Honey?" Julian commented, noticing her pallor. She clutched the edge of the table, breathing shallowly and rapidly. I can't breathe right." Other diners turned and murmurs of concern spread from our table. "What's happening?" She tried to stand, stumbled, and fell backward with a heavy thud. Julian yelled for someone to call an ambulance. I remained completely still. When her panicked eyes met mine, I spoke with the coldness of someone stating basic facts. I switched the glasses. "Elena." The silence became unbearable. Her eyes fixed on mine. Terror. Comprehension. Betrayal reflected back at me like a mirror. "What did you put in my wine?" Each word was measured, deliberate. A prosecutor's tone. "What are you talking about?" Julian's face went from confusion to rage to disbelief. I didn't look at him, only at her. Ask your wife what she meant to tell me she put in the glass. Elena sobbed. A broken sound. It was just to help you relax. To make you compliant for the papers. Julian's expression shifted. The full weight of catastrophic total failure registered in his eyes, which widened impossibly. Matteo appeared, a phone already pressed to his ear. Calling emergency services. The manager showed up, trying to maintain discretion as chaos erupted at table 12. Minutes later, paramedics rushed through the entrance. Equipment rattling. They surrounded Elena, took her vital signs, and asked rapid questions. What did you take? Any medications? Any allergies? She ingested something from a vial she was carrying. I said clearly. Check her purse. They overturned it. The contents spilled onto the white tablecloth. Lipstick, wallet, keys, and a small brown bottle. No! Elena screamed, her voice cutting across the restaurant. The paramedics examined the vial, exchanged glances, and began using medical terminology. They lifted her onto a stretcher and strapped her down. Julian followed closely, like debris dragged in a current. The manager approached cautiously. Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. Her medical bills are her responsibility. I interrupted quietly. Not mine. I left money on the table for the uneaten meal and walked out into the cool night. My car was still parked where I had left it hours ago, as if it belonged to another life. I drove toward the hospital, following the fading sound of the ambulance sirens. City lights blurred around me. Traffic signals changed color. Other drivers rushed to where they thought they needed to go. I drove carefully, respecting all the rules, as a cold clarity settled into my bones like winter. The hospital waiting room smelled of fear wrapped in antiseptic. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, bathing everything in a pale blue. I sat in a plastic chair, hands clasped, while Julian paced like a caged animal. He hadn't spoken to me since we arrived. The silence felt appropriate. Around 2:00 inches the morning, a doctor appeared. Young, tired, competent-looking. Family of Elena Sterling Fox. We both stood up. She's stable, the doctor said, consulting a tablet. Diazepam intoxication. A considerable amount. We administered flumazenil and started an IV drip. She'll make a full recovery, but we'll keep her for observation until tomorrow afternoon. Can we see her? Julian's voice cracked briefly. She's sedated and likely won't remember the visit. The doctor's gaze shifted to me. The substance came from a prescription vial. We'll have to report this. Of course, I said calmly. Do what's necessary. We followed him through double doors, down corridors that all looked identical. Elena lay in a bed surrounded by monitors, an IV in her arm. Her face looked younger, stripped of makeup and artifice. My daughter, the child I held minutes after birth, the woman who tried to drug me into signing away my divorce, or rather, my legacy. Julian moved close to her bed and took her hand. I remained by the door, an observer, not a participant. After 5 minutes, I left, I found my car in the parking garage and drove home through deserted streets while the city slept. The mansion looked different as I entered. Same furniture, same artwork, different meaning. I walked through rooms that now felt like enemy territory. Pausing outside Elena's closed bedroom door. Beyond it, the bed where she had conspired with Julian. The space where they had rehearsed my demise. I continued to my study, locked the door, and stood by the window, watching the darkness slowly fade from the sky. Dawn arrived with surgical precision. Orange light replacing black, crisp and clear. Sleep seemed irrelevant. Instead, I made coffee. Strong, bitter, so hot it burned. I sat at my desk and began writing in my leather-bound notebook. Not emotions, but facts. Dates, conversations, financial transactions. Creating a timeline. Around 8, I heard the front door open. Julian was returning, his steps heavy on the stairs, the door closing with controlled force, his anger vibrating through the walls. I went downstairs, poured another cup of coffee, and waited. They arrived home together around 2:00 inches the afternoon. Elena walked slowly, hospital discharge papers clutched in her hand, dressed in yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale. She didn't look at me. Julian held her arm at the elbow for support or necessity. Impossible to tell. I stood in the living room archway. We need to talk. I think we're done talking. Julian shot back. Sit down. It wasn't a request. Something in my tone compelled them to obey. They slumped onto the sofa, forming a unified front against me. I want you out of this house, I said quietly. You have until the end of the month. Elena's face crumpled. Dad, please. You tried to poison me, drug me into signing something while incapacitated. What papers were they? Elena, a power of attorney. A will amendment. Property deeds. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Real ones. Finally. But they were for herself, not for what she had done. Julian leaned forward, his voice hardening. We can explain this. You're overreacting. She made a mistake. She regrets it. She regrets failing. I set down my coffee cup with precision. There's a difference. You deliberately switched the glasses. His accusation hung in the air. You poisoned your own daughter. I simply returned the gift. We stared at each other. The lines drawn. The war declared. We're not leaving, Julian said flatly. This is our home. We have rights. No rights. No claim. Nothing. I filed the paperwork at the end of February. After that, I'll take legal action. Behind me, Elena was sobbing. Julian's voice rose. We'll see what the lawyers think about elder abuse and mental incapacity. I stopped and turned around. Try it. Please give me more evidence. He snapped his mouth shut. I spent the next 3 days observing them like specimens under glass. They kept to Elena's room. voices rising and falling behind closed doors. I positioned myself near the air vents, near the doors, wherever sound travelled. Old house, thin walls, secrets that leaked. On Thursday morning, I heard Julian on the phone. Competency evaluation. Financial manipulation by the daughter. She deliberately poisoned him. Yes, I can document his erratic behavior. They were building their narrative, painting me as the villain, them as a concerned family, protecting an old man from himself. I documented everything, noting snippets of conversation, marking dates and times, photographing the financial records I obtained, the bank statements that showed transfers of money from my accounts to theirs, purchases made on the credit cards I had given them, the paper trail of dependence. Patterns emerged. 15 months ago, a $50,000 transfer for emergency house repairs that were never done. 8 months ago, a $70,000 withdrawal for an undocumented investment opportunity. 3 months ago, Julian suddenly had a new car in his name, paid for in cash. My money, their lifestyle, my trust, their exploitation. On February 20th, sitting in my study, I called the law firm of Harris & Cole, the lawyer my banker recommended for complex family matters. The receptionist's voice was efficient and professional. I need a consultation regarding potential fraud, financial elder exploitation, and attempted. I paused, choosing my words. Harm by family members. Typing sounds on her end. Can you come in on Thursday? What time? Does 2:00 inches the afternoon work for you? I'll be there. I hung up the phone. Through the window, I saw Elena and Julian in the backyard, engrossed in an urgent conversation, planning their next move. I will too. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Financial manipulation timeline, evidence log. The first entry started with a date 15 months ago. The cursor blinked on the blank document. Waiting. I typed the header, Financial manipulation timeline, evidence log. Below it, I began listing everything I remembered. Tracing back through 18 months of trust slowly eroded into exploitation. March 2024, transfer of $50,000 for emergency house repairs. I checked my bank records, found the transaction, and cross-referenced it with my calendar. No contractor had visited the house that month. No permits were filed. The house looked exactly the same. First lie. First theft. In May 2024, they had scheduled a lawyer consultation. I searched my email and found the confirmation. They had told me it was about estate planning to simplify things for everyone. Now I understood what they really wanted. Access. Control. Signatures on documents I never authorized. The list grew. Each entry a small wound that had seemed insignificant at the time. Taken together, they formed a pattern that looked like premeditated theft. I worked until midnight, then reviewed everything at dawn on February 21st. I printed 3 copies, organized them in labeled folders, and dressed in my best suit, projecting competence, not victimhood. The drive downtown to Miami took 40 minutes. The Brickell financial district rose in glass towers that caught the morning sun and reflected it like mirrors. I parked in the underground garage, took the elevator to the 24th floor, and carried my folder like evidence, which it was. Harrison Cole's office occupied a corner with views of Biscayne Bay. The receptionist, professional and efficient, led me to a conference room, where the city spread out below me like a map of territory to be defended. Harrison entered promptly at 2:40. Impeccable suit. A gaze that evaluated without judging. We shook hands. I liked that he didn't waste time on unnecessary formalities. I opened the folder and slid the documents across the polished wood. Everything I can document. Timeline. Hospital medical records. Testimony. He read without interruption, asking incisive questions and taking notes with a fountain pen that deliberately scratched the notepad. Florida Statute 825, he finally said. Exploitation of an elderly person. It covers attempts to gain control of assets through coercion, manipulation, or incapacitation. He reviewed my file. This shows a clear pattern. The restaurant incident, the attempt to drug the person, that is a felony. But we need more documentation of their current behavior. What kind of documentation? Their current actions. Conversations where they discuss strategies. Attempts at manipulation. You mentioned they still live in your house. I nodded and he continued. I'm going to recommend a private investigator. Veronica Wu. She's an ex-police detective specializing in elder fraud cases. She can set up surveillance and document everything legally. He wrote a name and number on his card and slid it across. Call her. Get proof of what they're doing now. Not just what happened before. Then we talk about protective trusts, restraining orders, and a potential civil lawsuit. I left with a feeling I hadn't felt in weeks. Validation. This wasn't paranoia. This was legitimate protection. 4 days of close observation followed. I wrote everything down. Their whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The way they watched me like predators stalking an injured prey. Julian's hand was always on Elena's shoulder. Control disguised as affection. On Monday morning, February 25th, I drove to Pinewood. Veronica Wu's office was in a modest building. Professional degrees on the walls. No wasted space. She looked to be in her late 32nd with a penetrating gaze and a direct manner. Harrison sent your file, she said after I explained. Restaurant intoxication. Financial exploitation. Prolonged cohabitation with hostile people. You want surveillance? Any method that documents their behavior legally. Cameras in the common areas of your own home. Legal. Living room. Kitchen. Hallways. Audio and video. Cloud backup. Access from your phone. She gave me a quote. $5,000 upfront retainer plus hourly fees. I signed the contract without hesitation. The money was worthless compared to the truth. I'll need access on Tuesday, she said. Could you get them out for a couple of hours? I'll arrange it. On Tuesday morning, during breakfast, I casually mentioned, I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. Would you mind picking them up? Maybe we can grab lunch together. I gave them a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10. I texted Veronica. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. Cameras were placed on a living room bookshelf, in a kitchen clock above the table, and in a hallway smoke detector. Small, invisible, recording everything. 90 minutes later, installation complete. Everything completely normal, she stated. Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe. That night, I sat in my study with headphones on, watching the day's recordings. Their return from the errand. The conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked groceries. He's too quiet, Elena said, her voice tight with worry. It's suspicious. We need another approach. Julian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct hit didn't work. Time for the indirect hit. I saved the file, dated it, and labeled it Evidence Log Entry 1. The following days allowed me to build my case. February 28th. Julian discussed contingency plans. March 1st. Elena worried that I was acting strangely. March 2nd. They looked up lawyers to challenge my mental competency. March 3rd. Julian's search history showed declarations of parental incapacity. Every conversation was documented, saved, and organized into folders by topic. I watched them conspire against me with the methodical patience of someone building a legal case brick by brick. Veronica sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. I've been feeling so tired lately. Their heads snapped up like bloodhounds on a scent. That night at dinner, I feigned forgetting where I had left my reading glasses. I've been very forgetful. Elena leaned forward, feigning concern. Maybe you should see a doctor. Dad. It's normal at your age, Julian added casually, but it's definitely worth checking out. I nodded, playing the confused old man. Later, reviewing the recording, I saw them celebrate my confession as if it were a gift. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, and hundreds of hours of recording, I opened my phone and found Harrison Cole's number. Tomorrow, we would build a strategy. It was time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, the early symptoms of dementia, and the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Elena was by the coffee maker watching my reaction. I found this online. I thought it might be helpful to understand what's been happening with you. I picked up the first article and skimmed it with appropriate confusion. I suppose reading wouldn't hurt. Knowledge is power, Julian added from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed each page, and filed them as evidence. Psychological manipulation documented. They were constructing a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted to handle his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, More articles appeared. Residences for people with dementia. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for those experiencing cognitive difficulties. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. "We need an expert opinion," Julian said. "Someone who can evaluate him professionally." "A psychologist?" Elena's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. "I know someone. Dr. Elias Thorne, a clinical psychologist specializing in elderly cognition. We set up a casual lunch. I introduce them. Elias makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father shows symptoms, Elias documents them. If not, Julian shrugged, then we'll know for sure. I watched this conversation 3 times, taking notes. The tension was escalating. They were seeking external validation for their version of events. On March 10th, I met Julian for lunch at a cafe in Coconut Grove. He had suggested it that morning so we can get to know each other better without the stress of work. And I accepted with appropriate gratitude. Dr. Elias Thorne joined us 15 minutes in. "Hey, this is my friend Elias." I mentioned him, the psychologist. We shook hands. Elias, about 40-something. Professional demeanor, cautious eyes. "Julian told me about you. Successful sale. Congratulations." We talked for an hour. My performance was impeccable. I occasionally searched for words, asked Elias to repeat questions, and commented on my forgetfulness. I didn't exaggerate, just a hint of confusion. Elias maintained professional distance, but I caught him watching me, evaluating, cataloguing. "It was a pleasure meeting you," Elias said as lunch ended, handing me his card. "If you ever want to discuss professional topics, I'm available." I put the card in my pocket. Evidence, not service. That night, the surveillance cameras recorded Julian calling Elias from the living room. The speakerphone on. "What did you think?" Julian asked impatiently. "He's 63. Some age-appropriate variation in memory isn't unusual." Elias's voice was carefully neutral. "I can't make clinical assessments based on an informal lunch conversation. But if there were genuine concerns, I could evaluate him formally. With his consent. Yes. But Julian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns about his well-being, there are proper channels." "Sure. I'm just exploring options." After hanging up, Julian's face darkened. "We'll find someone else." I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics intervened. From March 12th to 17th, I continued my performance. Small errors, confusion, repeated questions. On the 15th, at breakfast, I asked Elena about the plans we had discussed the night before, feigning forgetfulness. Her eyes lit up with excitement, barely concealed. The surveillance cameras recorded everything. Their conversations about my decline, Julian researching commitment procedures, Elena worrying that things were moving too slowly. On March 18th, I adjusted my strategy. At dinner, I casually commented that I had been thinking about updating my will. Julian suggested it given the business sale. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Elena, trying to sound nonchalant. That's responsible. Dad. When are you meeting with him? He'll be preparing the documents soon. Making sure you're well taken care of. I left the words hanging in the air. Bait in a trap. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The surveillance cameras recorded them in the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but the microphone caught everything. He mentioned the will, Elena said, barely containing her hope. That doesn't mean he's changing it in our favor. Julian's voice held a warning. It could be the opposite. But if he really is confused, if we document that he's not competent when making changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more evidence of his decline. Real evidence, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my supposed incompetence. Video, everything. Record strange behavior. Build a case for incapacity that would invalidate any legal change against their interests. I watched them celebrate their cleverness, pouring wine and toasting to progress. They thought they were winning. I closed the laptop, opened my phone, and searched for Harrison Cole's number. 3 weeks of recordings, conversations, plans, attempts at manipulation, psychological warfare, all captured with perfect digital clarity. Tomorrow, we would discuss how weeks of evidence could be turned into a legal strategy, how surveillance could be a tool for pressure, how their own words could destroy them. I had documented their plan with the same methodical patience they had used on mine. Only I had done it better. With more detail. With more strategy. It was time to move to the next phase. It was time to show them what happened when they underestimated a man who built an empire from scratch, who understood that true power lay in preparation, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I texted Harrison, I have new compelling evidence. Need an urgent meeting. He responded in minutes. Friday at 10, 0 inches the morning. Bring everything. I hung up the phone. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they slept soundly, believing they were the architects of my ruin. They had no idea they were building their own. The morning light streamed through the study windows. March 19th at 8, I picked up the phone and dialed Harrison Cole's direct number. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Sterling, your message said you had evidence. Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings. Conversations. Attempts at manipulation. All documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon at 2, bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop called Legal Evidence Package. Surveillance files copied, organized by date and severity. Printed transcripts of their most damning conversations. Julian talking about competency challenges. Elena worried about my suspicious silence. Both celebrating their supposed progress toward controlling my assets. Veronica's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, underlined and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives, one for Harrison and one backup. At 2, I sat across from Harrison in his conference room, the USB drive and documents between us, like exhibits in a trial. He watched 3 hours of recording, read all the transcripts, and studied Veronica's behavioral analysis. Finally, he leaned back, fingers interlaced. This is extensive. Multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil lawsuit, criminal charges for attempted poisoning. He tapped the trust document I had mentioned. But first, we protect your assets. Irrevocable living trust. How does that work? Assets are transferred to the trust. It becomes an independent legal entity. An independent trustee administers it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once signed, they are untouchable. Not even you can modify them. He pulled out a notepad and began sketching the structure. We'll make it bulletproof. They won't be able to access it through lawsuits, manipulate the administrators, or effectively challenge it. How long would it take? A week. If we act now, you'll transfer the majority of your assets. Keep enough liquidity for personal use. We'll establish strict conditions for Elena's eventual access. What conditions? Harrison smiled. A sharp professional grin. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. Absence of pending lawsuits. In short, any measure that ensures she cannot access the money through coercion or fraud. Over the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. $25 million transferred to the trust. $5 million kept liquid for my use. Elena could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her for financial reasons. On March 23rd, a meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services. 2 fiduciary officers, professional and impartial, explained their role. They would follow this document to the letter. No family pressure. No manipulation. No exceptions. March 24th. Final signing. Harrison's conference room again. But this time with a notary and fiduciary officers present. The documents lay across the table like a treaty ending a war. I signed each page. Initialed and dated. The notary officially sealed each signature. Your assets are protected, Harrison said as I put the copies in a leather folder. She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue you for them. The trust is irrevocable. Case closed. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't felt since February. Power. Control. Security. At home, life continued its strange theatre. They still knew nothing of the trust. The surveillance cameras recorded their casual conversations about the inheritance. Their certainty that eventually my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. Buttered toast. Elena mentioned when we inherit, as if it were inevitable. That night, Julian's laptop search history, how to challenge a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st, an auspicious date for plans to unravel. On March 31st, I texted both of them. Family meeting tomorrow. 10. 0 inches the morning. In the living room. Important. Harrison had advised doing it in public or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. My house, I replied. My rules. The cameras would record everything. April 1st arrived. A clear, bright day. I set up my laptop connected to the television with the surveillance footage ready. At 10, they entered the living room. A palpable, nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than I was, establishing a hierarchy. I have made decisions about my estate. I filed the trust document. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their attention sharpened. I explained systematically. $25 million transferred. Independent trustee. Conditions of access. Minimum age 45. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. I watched their faces register comprehension. What? Elena's voice cracked. Are you cutting me out? I am protecting my assets from manipulation. Julian leaped up from the sofa. All this over the restaurant. A mistake. And you? A mistake. I picked up the remote and hit play. Their voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them talking about my competency issues. Planning to document my decline. Celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. You spied on us, Elena cried now. Your own daughter. I protected myself from those who tried to drug me into signing legal documents. We're going to sue. Julian stepped forward, poorly disguising his aggression. We're going to challenge this. You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof. I looked him in the eyes without blinking. Try to challenge it. Don't waste your money on lawyers. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did. Julian stormed out. Elena followed, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera recording of the confrontation I had just captured, saved it with the date and time, and a label, evidence of reaction. The rage confirmed their guilt. The following week, the house became a battlefield. Doors slamming. Hostile silence. Calls to lawyers were overheard, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unshakable. On April 7th, Elena attempted reconciliation. She knocked on my study door, tears welling up. Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter. My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. Please leave my study. She left. I sat alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed to reclaim my house. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words: get them out of the house. That same night, I called a real estate agent, Linda Moretti, recommended by my banker for her discretion and speed. I want to sell my house. When can we list it? I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we could list it this weekend. April 8th. She arrived with a tape measure and a professional appraisal. I walked through the rooms where my daughter and son-in-law still lived. evaluating the market value of the house they were borrowing. A lovely property. I can list it for $7 million. This market moves fast, but the property must be vacant for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showings scheduled for April 12th. I notified Elena and Julian via text message. Showings Friday. You'll need to be out for 3 hours. You're selling the house? Julian replied by text. Yes. There was no response. They left on Friday morning. And when they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces registered the comprehension that I was completely dismantling their life. On April 15th, I asked Harrison to draft the eviction notice formal, legal, final, giving them 60 days to vacate. I handed it to them that night as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Julian read it, his face darkening. He tore it in half. You can't evict us. This is our home. Read the notice. Challenge it all you want. No lease. No rent. No tenant rights. 60 days. June 15th. We'll fight this. Try it. They hired a lawyer on April 16th. I listened to their consultation call via surveillance cameras. The lawyer's assessment matched Harrison's. If there's no lease, he has grounds. You live there by permission, which he is now revoking. Harrison filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. The court date was set for May 3rd, 3 weeks away. Meanwhile, I rented an apartment downtown, month-to-month lease, oceanfront, quiet, a clean place, no grudges. I moved out on April 28th. The house became hostile territory. I stayed mostly at the apartment, returning only for necessities. On each visit, the surveillance cameras captured their desperation. Elena crying, Julian raging, both calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th arrived. Miami-Dade Courthouse. 3rd floor. Eviction trial. Harrison and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Elena, Julian, and their lawyer. Young and overmatched. Aware he had no case. Judge Vance took the bench. A man in his 52nd, serious-looking, experienced in seeing people try to evade consequences. Their lawyer stood. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years. Under what agreement? Judge Vance interrupted. His family. The plaintiff is Ms. Sterling Fox's father. That is not a lease agreement. Do they pay rent? No. Do they have a written lease? No, Your Honor. Then they are guests without a contract. Mr. Sterling has given appropriate 60-day notice. He looked at Harrison. Yes. Your Honor. Served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Vance reviewed the documents. I see no legal impediment to this eviction. The plaintiff is the owner of the property. The defendants have no lease or rental agreement. Notice was proper. He looked at Elena and Julian. You have until June 15th. After that date, Law enforcement can intervene. Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final decision. In the hallway, Julian confronted me, his voice low and menacing. You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I am removing those who poisoned me. We'll make you pay. With what money? I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hallway. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed at the apartment. They remained in the house, packing slowly, desperately searching for rental properties they couldn't afford without my help. The surveillance cameras recorded endless arguments. Elena breaking down. Julian's fury at their complete defeat. On June 14th, I received confirmation. The buyer of the house had completed the inspection and the sale was approved for closing in August. Pending possession handover. June 15th was moving day. I arrived at the house at noon. A large moving truck was in the driveway loading furniture. Elena, eyes red, face haggard, gave instructions to the movers. Julian loaded boxes, his jerky movements reflecting contained fury. They didn't even greet me. I stood on the lawn watching them load their possessions. Everything I had bought for them. Everything they had accumulated during 5 years of living off my generosity. The truck pulled away at 4. They drove off in Julian's car without looking back. I entered the empty house, the echo of footsteps ringing on the hardwood floor. No furniture, no trace of them. No trace of poison in the air. Room by room, I walked through the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures once hung. Indentations in the carpet where furniture had been. The house felt like an empty shell, contaminated by what had happened inside, but finally blissfully empty. My phone vibrated. Harrison. Eviction completed. Ready to talk civil lawsuit. I stood in the center of the living room. My living room. Looking around at the emptiness. Selling the house would erase their presence completely. But first, one more legal action. One final blow. I texted back. Yes. Let's schedule a meeting for Monday. It's time for this to be definitive. I wrote my reply to Harrison. Yes. Let's schedule the meeting for Monday. It was time for this to be permanently on the record. The empty living room surrounded me. No furniture. Just the hardwood floor and the echo. I sat down, my back against the wall, laptop resting on my knees, and opened the evidence folders one last time. Months of documentation, surveillance recordings ordered by date, hospital medical records, Mateo's statement, Veronica's reports, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every proof that what happened to me was not paranoia, but premeditated exploitation. I created a final chronological document, printed everything, and organized it into a tabbed, expanding folder. Each item told part of the story. Taken together, they were undeniable. On Monday morning, June 16th, I met Harrison in his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table as if it were an indictment. Civil lawsuit under Florida Statute 825.103, Harrison said, taking notes. Elder exploitation, financial manipulation, attempted battery by drugging, coercion, aggravated emotional distress, fraud. Conspiracy. Seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about money, I said. I know. It's about public record documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences? Exactly. We filed the complaint on June 17th. Elena and Julian received the court notification in their new apartment, a small two-bedroom unit in a neighborhood far removed from the luxury of Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Harrison a few days later, his voice tight on the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined. They should have considered that before attempting to drug and defraud their benefactor, Harrison replied coldly. Discovery began. Harrison requested their financial records. Bank statements revealed the truth. No savings. Living paycheck to paycheck on credit cards. Drowning in debt created by their life expectations. On June 28th, the settlement offer arrived. I met Harrison in his office to review it. $50,000 payment plan. Private admission of guilt. No trial. It's reasonable, Harrison said cautiously. They clearly can't pay the full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I slid the papers back across his desk. No. I want this to be public. I want it on the court records forever. Trial is risky. The judge could award less compensation. I don't care about the money. I care about the record. I looked him in the eyes. They tried to destroy me. I want official record that they were wrong and I was right. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we go to trial. July became the month of preparation. Matteo confirmed he would testify. The hospital doctor provided an expert affidavit. Veronica prepared the surveillance evidence for court presentation. I gave a deposition. Hours of questions answered under oath, laying the factual foundation. July 25th. Preliminary hearing. The judge set the trial date for July 28th. That Monday morning dawned clear and hot. I dressed in my best suit and arrived early at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse. Judge Hastings presided. She was in her 50 seconds. Known for her impartiality and strong rulings, Harrison had recommended a bench trial instead of a jury trial. Judges understand elder law better than average citizens, he explained. Opening statements. Harrison presented the timeline and evidence summary with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young and out of his depth, argued that a family misunderstanding had been exaggerated. Matteo testified first. He described the restaurant incident with full conviction. I saw Mrs. So. Sterling Fox pour something from a small vial into Mr. Sterling's wine glass while he was away from the table. Clear. Liquid. Deliberate action. Their lawyer attempted cross-examination. Could you have been mistaken? No. I know what I saw. I couldn't keep quiet. The hospital doctor explained the diazepam analysis results. Dosage. Dangers. Veronica presented the surveillance methodology, chain of custody, and authentication of the recordings. Day 2. July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom screen. Their own voices filled the space, discussing competency issues, planning Elias's consultation, and celebrating their supposed progress toward the inheritance. Julian said, "He's 63, not lucid anymore." Elena's voice said, "We deserve this money." I watched Judge Hastings take notes, her expression serious and focused. Elena testified, crying. She admitted to the restaurant incident, but claimed she only wanted him to listen to her about important papers. Julian testified. Defensive and hostile. He blamed me for overreacting to a family conflict. Then it was my turn. The witness stand felt solemn, formal, everyone watching me. I stated my name, my age, and my relationship to the defendants. I answered Harrison's questions calmly and precisely. Restaurant surveillance, trust creation, eviction. I presented the evidence one by one. Cross-examination became aggressive. "Aren't you being vengeful, Mr. Sterling? I'm seeking accountability. There's a difference." Judge Hastings asked her own question. Why pursue a civil suit after fiduciary protection and eviction? I looked straight at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be on public record for my protection, as a precedent for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Harrison, this is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted battery by drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer, family conflict and poor judgment. Yes, but not criminal exploitation. Judge Hastings closed her notebook. I will issue the ruling in writing in 2 weeks. I left the courthouse in the late afternoon heat with the satisfaction of having completed my task. I spoke the truth publicly, presented the evidence. Now justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks wondering if the system would validate what I had suffered or dismiss it as family drama. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited for the world to confirm what I already knew, that I had been right to protect myself, to defend myself, to demand justice. August 15th. The dawn light filtered over the ocean outside my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter. Familiar. Comforting. 2 weeks after the trial ended, the phone rang at 9. Mr. Sterling. Harrison. We have the verdict. I sat down. The infinite ocean stretching out before me. The judge ruled in your favor. Total victory. Clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress was found. Judgment for $350,000 plus court costs, $75,000 in punitive damages, $425,000 total. The number seemed abstract. There's more, Harrison continued. Permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly. No calls. No letters. No communications through third parties. Violation results in contempt charges. And the payment? They have nothing. Court-ordered payment plan. Garnishment of future wages until the debt is settled could take years. But the judgment is public record. Searchable permanent documentation of what they attempted. That's what I wanted. Not the money. Documentation. Validation. Public record that I wasn't paranoid or cruel, that I was the victim of an attack, and I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Harrison, for everything. You did the work. I just legalized it. After hanging up, I sat watching the sunrise. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Hastings wrote, "The evidence presented demonstrates the premeditated exploitation of an elderly person by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, the attempt to drug someone to facilitate document signing, constitutes a felony in itself. Subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation and planning. This court finds the defendant's actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum civil sanctions." Reprehensible. Maximum penalty. Public document. I printed the opinion and filed it. One more document in a case now closed. On August 16th, I closed on the sale of the Coral Gables house, sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They will never know what happened within those walls. They will fill it with different memories, different lives, different futures. That same day, I bought a downtown apartment, 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, ocean views to the horizon. $850,000 cash purchase from the house sale. Modern. Impeccable. No history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived and was simply placed. Nothing excessive. Nothing unnecessary. The space felt like taking a breath after being underwater. August 20th. Last meeting with Veronica in her Pinewood office. The certification still hung on the wall. "Case closed," she said, handing me a USB drive. All the surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation. Go on the record that I thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood and extended her hand. Take care. Mr. Sterling. We shook hands. The matter concluded. The professional relationship was over. On August 22nd, I sat on my new balcony, phone in hand. I searched for Elena's contact, my finger hovering over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Julian's followed. Both disappeared from my phone, from my life, from my future. The restraining order legally barred them from communication. Even if they wanted to apologize, reconcile, or explain, the law prevented it. 3 years minimum. Enough time for life to move on without them. I felt nothing. Neither satisfaction nor sadness. Just a serene peace. On August 23rd and 24th, I established new routines. Coffee on the balcony in the morning. Walks by the sea in the afternoon. Reading at night with the sound of the ocean drifting through the open windows. I called old friends I had neglected during the chaos. Made lunch plans. Reconnected. And rebuilt my social life outside of surveillance and legal battles. On August 25th, the sunset painted the sky in layers. Orange blending into purple. Then deep blue. I stood on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the day turn into night. 6 months since February. Since that restaurant, since Matteo's warning, the glass switch, and everything that followed, I protected my assets through the trust, evicted them from my house, held them accountable with a civil judgment, and put their exploitation on public record. I won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like emerging from dark waters and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth weighed on me, unchangeable. But I refused to be a victim. I refused to accept the manipulation. I refused to let trust make me vulnerable to destruction. The ocean stretched infinitely, the horizon line crisp and defined. Somewhere in the city behind me, Elena and Julian lived with the consequences. A court debt that would follow them for years. A public record that affected their job applications and background checks. A restraining order that prevented them from spinning their story or seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy, attention, emotional dedication, all that I had dedicated to documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now I only had peace. The sun touched the horizon. The colors deepened, and the city lights began to twinkle behind me. My coffee was cold, but I didn't move to refill it. I simply stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue, oblivious to human drama. I built an empire from nothing, sold it for $30 million, protected $25 million through an unshakable trust, lost a daughter, but saved myself. I found justice in the courts, and peace in separation. Some stories end with family reunions, forgiveness, and healing. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun disappeared behind the ocean, darkness settling around me. I finished my cold coffee, left the cup on the balcony railing, and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow I would call my former partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I would have lunch with friends. Eventually, I would date, travel, and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight I simply stood here, free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore below. The city hummed with its infinite rhythm. Life went on, indifferent to individual struggles, offering new days to those who survived old battles. I had survived, and that was enough. If you liked this story, please hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thank you for watching.